this year, we undertook a great job as students orient towards social research, and during this process we have the opportunity to meet victims of violence due to forced displacement in Colombia. Among them, we were moved by the story of Carmenza, a peasant woman from the Sinu community who stressed that before, during and after the victimizing event, governmental, public and private institutions have not fully complied with the purpose that each one of them has. Therefore, we began to ask ourselves, how are the institutions intervening in the integral reparation of the victims? Since these are the guarantors of providing resources for the well-being of this population and in some way support that construction of peace that it is currently to be achieved. According to the story, we realize that we have to know more about the system in Colombia, and we find that in Colombia the public power is governed by three branches: judicial, executive and legislative. Through the executive branch, all government plans are managed in an organized and coordinated manner towards administrative departments, ministries, among others. In the specific case of the victims of the armed conflict, the department that determines policies, designs projects, and regulates the plans for adequate attention and integral reparation is the Departamento de Prosperidad Social. From there, the macro institution that coordinates these norms is the Unidad para las Víctimas, which is responsible for allocating resources, designing responsibilities to the more than 51 entities that make it up at the national level, coordinated the articulation between the ministries of the state, among others. However, Ms. Carmenza told us about the lack of response from the Unidad para las Víctimas in conjunction with other entities in charge, that is, many of the victims, for example, don't take care of them in a medical center because their data don't match of the others documents that the Unidad asks you to take to your medical appointment are not correct or missing others. In addition, she told us that when she had some problem, like economic or health of others, she went to the corresponding institution, but they did not offer her keen attention, nor did they solve the problem. On the contrary, they asked her to go to other entities which either gave no solution or simply told him to return in 15 days, repeatedly. And finally, Ms. Carmenza emphasized a lot about the difficulty of getting a job for his husband, since farming and livestock are the only things she knows, and the Unidad para las Víctimas and other entities doesn't give her the opportunity to study work or work because of that. Then it is necessary to recognize that since the narration of Carmenza, the Unidad para las Víctimas is entities and each ministry are not working together and articulated. So they are not exercising their duty by not promoting total welfare to the victims, nor provide adequate care, assistance, and repair to each of them. How many of us know the number of people who benefit and depend on the institutions that the Unidad para las Víctimas manage? Let's start with the total number of victims of the armed conflict thrown at us by the platform of the Red Nacional de Información this year. More than 8 million people. Although the numbers have decreased significantly in recent years, the number is still quite high. Of this, approximately 6 million people are receiving comprehensive assistance and reparation, as you can see here in the statistics.
There are many people, no? There are many people who depend on the system of institutions that provide services to the victims of the armed conflict in fundamental areas such as food, housing, work, mental health, physical health, and others. For this reason, and taking these figures into account, we, as citizens and professionals, what are we going to do for Carmenza and for people who, like her, are victims of the armed conflict? Remember that each of the decisions taken by any type of entity have a considerable influence on the construction of cultural identities and narratives, which in the long term can be negative or positive depending on the level of inequality that institutions promote. In this case, the lack of articulation between all the institutions is having an impact on the integrity of the victims, which results in inequality for the majority of the community. For this reason, it's important that from our personal positions, we can get involved and relate to the victims as we approach their communities and thus be able to inform ourselves about their problems in front of the institutions they have attended, as well as mitigate any stereotype or prejudice that sometimes as citizens we have been able to attribute to this population. At this point, it is easier both personally and professionally to contribute to important and share our knowledge to the communities and thus together find solutions that provide well-being and improvement in the quality of life of victims by fully enforcing their rights and by informing the institutions of the problems that have been occurring to give them their respective solutions. Finally, regarding the role of institutions, the Departamento Administrativo de Prosperidad Social must ensure that the legal mechanism is strengthened where both public and private institutions fulfill their work fully and justly through change in public policies, so that the norms of the different institutions are generated and modified, and thus the victims of the armed conflict will be those who can obtain benefits of that change. It could also be important for the victims to turn to the academic community, especially to psychologists, who have the ability to influence the creation of such policies by acting from the state agencies and organizations, and be able to support them through investigations. Like the story of Carmenza, there are hundreds similar or worse in our country. The solutions that we named previously could have a positive impact on the quality of life of the victims of the armed conflict, since if the institutions are articulate, they will be able to provide better service and the distribution of this will be fairer. The actions of each of us can be the basis of the transformation, since if it's an information network that can lead to a real and necessary social change for the victims of the Colombian armed conflict.